Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're so excited that you're joining us today for the start of this 5-part class, Becoming a Genealogist and Family Historian. I'm Christopher Paget. I'm the president of the Kentucky Genealogical Society. I'm joined today with my wonderful co-host, Melissa Barker. Welcome, Melissa.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. And we will be kicking things off here shortly with our speaker, Susan Court. But before we begin, just have some very quick housekeeping announcements. And I've just asked that you please listen carefully to these announcements. Number one, this series is being recorded and it will be available and accessible on YouTube. The recordings will be posted typically the day following the live class. Number two, there is a handout that will be provided to you at the end of the series. And it is an extensive handout that Susan has compiled that's going to help you. And then number three, most importantly, if you are having technical issues, if this is the first webinar you've ever participated in, if you can't get your audio to work, all those types of questions, maybe your computer's not working, the advice that I will give to you is if you have a lot of applications open on your computer, you want to close out of your email, your messaging, all of those, because those applications can interfere with the GoToWebinar. So, and if you are having real challenges, then just catch the recording as it's posted on YouTube. With that, I'm so excited to turn things over to Melissa Barker to introduce our speaker for the 5-part series.
Thank you, Chris. Susan Court is a genealogist and author of 12 family histories. I'm amazed. Many of which are in the collections of historical societies or museums, and 15 genealogy or history articles. She's a frequent lecturer on genealogy and moderator of genealogy discussion groups, a member of 9 genealogical or historical societies in the United States and Great Britain, including the Kentucky Genealogical Society, yay, where she serves as a member of the board. She is also a member of the United States Daughters of 1812, the River Raisin chapter, and she is one of my personal heroes. And so I'm excited to hear this presentation. Go ahead, Susan.
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Chris. All right. Let's get started. So I want to make sure, is my screen up, Melissa or Chris? I'm not seeing it right now.
Yeah, no, it's gone. I don't know what happened.
Okay. Is it there now?
There it is. There it is. Now you've got it.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks again. Welcome, everybody, to Becoming a Genealogist and Family Historian. My goal in this 5-week series of presentations is to introduce you to the wonderful world of genealogy and give you the tools to research, record, and chronicle your family's history. To that end, I have divided the material into 5 parts. Today, I will cover a genealogist's motivation and objectives, as well as the language of genealogy, definitions, abbreviations, symbols, and terms. In the second session next week, I will explore initial and ultimate challenges you will face, techniques and tools which you will need at first for recording your research. The types of records for which you will search in person and online, and the location of those records for in-person research. In the third session, I will discuss how to search online, and I will demonstrate how to do that. In the fourth session, I will explore the use of software programs and close the research and recordation part of the series with a discussion on how to use DNA to conduct genealogical research. In the fifth and last session, I will review ways to chronicle your family's history, getting started, and choosing an appropriate medium. I will end that session with some lessons I have learned in writing 12 family histories and stories, mostly mine, but also some friends, families, and 15 articles. Before getting started, I must state that the views expressed in this presentation are mine and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Genealogical Society or any of its board members. Likewise, neither the Society nor I endorse any service, product, or publication noted or otherwise discussed in the presentation. So let's get started. So for me, that is sharing with you a quote attributed to Della Cummings Wright around about 80 years ago. We are the chosen. In each family, there is one who seems called to find the ancestors, to put flesh on their bones and make them live again, to tell this family story and to feel that somehow they know and approve. Doing genealogy is not a cold gathering of facts, but instead breathing life into all who have gone before. We are the storytellers of the tribe. So as I mentioned, I'm going to cover two topics. This is really going to be very basic today, everybody. Motivation and objectives, and then definitions, abbreviations, symbols, and terms, basically the language of genealogy. So what motivates someone to pursue genealogy? The reasons vary. Curiosity about one's family. Where do they come from? What do they do for a living? Were any of them redheads? The desire to capture family history for children and grandchildren and other family members. Now, this was probably my major motivation to pursue genealogy. I started out as a history major, surprise, surprise. So you're going to be hearing a lot about my family, the Schlossers and the Heidels and the Courts and the Vollmers, because I use my experiences in researching and writing their stories, their histories throughout the course. You'll also hear about a few collateral relatives and also some friends' families as well. I want to mention here that I am an amateur genealogist, not a professional genealogist, although I hope my work products are professional. Genealogy is my avocation, not my profession. Another reason for someone to become a genealogist is in the use of the exercise of their religion. Before I get to that one, let me talk about medical information. That's the third reason that I've listed here. I had a cousin in one of the branches of my family that was really interested in why people in our family, what age they died, what age they were when they died, what did they die from. And so she insisted that I summarize my findings in that particular story, which I did. Also, a lot of people buy the subscribe to the 23andMe DNA program because that one is focused on medical information, although along the way people learn a lot about their heritage as well. So then, as I mentioned, the use of exercise in the practice of religion. Now, this is particularly true with respect to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its doctrine of baptism. I am not a member of the church, so what I'd like to do is just quote right from their website because I didn't really think it was appropriate for me to try to paraphrase their doctrine of religion. So this is right from their website. Latter-day Saints study family history and discover names of family members who died without being baptized. They are then baptized for those ancestors in the temple. So that its doctrine of baptism has motivated the LDS Church to pursue genealogy with vigor, and non-Mormon genealogists like myself have benefited tremendously. Another motivation is the desire to join a lineage society. The Daughters of American Revolution, I don't know, I think we lost, there we go. The Daughters of the American Revolution, the Sons of American Revolution, the Mayflower Society, the Jamestown Society, the Society of the Descendants of Ireland, USD 1812. According to the Hereditary Society Community of the United States of America, there are over 300 lineage societies which have existed since the colonial period and have provided avid genealogists, this is now I'm quoting from their website, avid genealogists and historians focused opportunities to study specific aspects of American history in juxtaposition with research into their own families. Now, membership in a society was not why I became a genealogist. But I was very pleased when I was able to join the USD 1812. And as Melissa mentioned, that's the Daughters of the War of 1812. And when I learned and documented that two of my third-degree great-grandfathers, Christian Christopher Hiles and William Henry Gates, fought at the Battle of the Thames in October of 1813. As Melissa mentioned, I am a member of the River Raisin chapter of the USD 1812. The search for new relatives or lost or separated family members is another motivation to become a genealogist. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the fourth session when I talk about using DNA for genealogical research. And obviously all of the above could apply. The objectives of a genealogist depends obviously on his or her motivation. Some people focus just on collecting information to build a family tree. Others want to go further and write or otherwise present their family stories. Now, regardless, the goal is to compile a credible and as accurate as possible picture of a family heritage. But I want to share with you 4 added benefits of becoming a genealogist, and from my own personal experience. And I think that all of them will apply or can apply to you. First, gaining insight into historical events. As I mentioned, my main objective is to write stories, and I like to put my stories into a historical context. So as a consequence, I have learned a lot about history. Did you know, for example, that Russia's Catherine the Great, after Russia defeated Turkey in the late 18th century, enticed German-speaking people from Alsace and nearby areas to settle along the Black Sea in the Ukraine, which Russia had won in that war? Well, I didn't until I started to do research into my Alsatian ancestor, Joseph Schlosser, and his relatives in Alsace. And I learned that many Alsatians at that time, around the turn of the 19th century, were enticed to go to the Ukraine around the Black Sea, including some of my collateral relatives. Now, they were actually expelled at the end of the 19th century, and many of them, including my cousins, including some of my cousins, settled in North Dakota. Another benefit that I've experienced is getting so much more out of traveling to other countries or either other places in the United States than just visiting a site. Now, this benefit is kind of hard to put into words. It's a kind of a connection or a comfort that you feel, or that I have felt, being in the places where my ancestors were born. I felt that in Strasbourg, in Alsace, France. I felt it in Manchester, England. My favorite story is that I was talking to the desk clerk in Strasbourg, France, and telling him why I was there. And he looked at me, and you're going to have to excuse my French here. He says, "Je suis Alsacien." And I said, "Well, mais oui, je suis Alsacien." I was like so pleased. I said, "Yeah, I am Alsatian." I really felt it. I was also thrilled when I found a heroine, and hopefully along the way you'll find somebody in your family that just really just stands out and is an inspiration to you. In this regard, it was my second-degree great-grandmother, Francoise Braun Ritz Wagner Rice. Frances, as she was known in the United States, came to America with my 4-year-old great-grandmother, Albertine Ritz, and settled in Zanesville, Ohio. She married twice more. She was a widow. This was in the 1840s. She married twice more, and with husband number 3, sailed down the rivers to Sanfordtown, Kentucky, on a flatboat. So she had a total of 11 children, 52 grandchildren, 32 of whom were born before she died in 1884, and many of her descendants became very prominent businessmen in northern Kentucky. Anyway, I just became enamored with my second-degree great-grandmother. And finally, and I hope this is true for you too, I have found and gotten to know so many cousins, second and third cousins whom I hadn't known before, that have truly enriched my life. While writing the story of my great-grandparents, W.C. and Mary Gertrude Summer Hiles, I met and became better acquainted with my Hiles cousins. And so every time I go home, and home for me is Noki. If you don't know the expression Noki, I'll tell you what it means. It's northern Kentucky. So when I go back home to Noki, I try as much as I can to have lunch with them. So regardless of your motivations, regardless of your objectives, trust me, you can get so much out of pursuing genealogy. Okay, before launching into the next part of the presentation, I want to give you a heads up. Genealogy is addictive. Once you start, it is hard to stop. Now, maybe it's the thrill of the hunt, or loving those aha moments, or just getting to know your family and yourself better. A couple months ago, I was reading Barbara Ray Venter's book, I Know Who You Are, and came across a passage that I think describes this phenomenon. Quote, anyone who has spent time building family trees knows how absorbing the process can be. You sit down at the computer and before you know it, 5 hours have passed, or 10 or more. Temporal matters fade away as you dig deeper and deeper into records. Appointments are missed. Cats go unfed, plants unwatered. It is so hard to lose yourself in the work. It is so easy to lose yourself in the work with the jumble of names and dates rattling in your brain and pushing out everything else. For me, few activities have ever been quite as compelling, maybe even as addictive, end quote. I have experienced this phenomenon, although I never forgot to feed anybody, and unfortunately my husband waters the plants. But I wouldn't give it up for anything, and I hope you'll find genealogy and family storytelling can be joyful experiences. That said, I want to give you a piece of advice. Advice I will repeat twice more by the end of the month. Do not try to do too much too quickly. You'll need to stay organized so that your research does not become overwhelming. And I'm going to give you some advice on how to do that eventually. But right now, I just want to say, don't try to do too much too quickly, because if it becomes overwhelming, you'll get discouraged. And you want to avoid being discouraged because you'll miss out on so much. Anyway, so now that if you're still with me, let's forge ahead into the nitty-gritty of the topic: definitions, abbreviations, symbols, and terms. There are certain words which have precise meaning that are important to a genealogist. Words that are frequently misused or used incorrectly. The first one is ancestor. An ancestor is a parent, a grandparent, a great-grandparent. It is not everybody in your family that preceded you. It's very precise. Parent, grandparent, great-grandparent. Descendant, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Collateral relative, siblings, aunts, grandaunts, uncles, granduncles, cousins. Pedigree, the ancestors of a particular person. And then family tree, a chart that shows all the people in a family over many generations and their relationship to one another. Okay, so a family tree may also refer to an all-in-one tree, a pedigree chart, or a descendants chart. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you what those look like, and I'm going to talk about them in much greater depth in probably lesson number 4. So we have ancestor, descendant, collateral relative, pedigree, family tree. Those are the words that you need to know. Of course, then there's genealogy, which is the establishment of a pedigree by extracting evidence from valid sources of how one generation is connected to the next. The word comes from the Greek genealogia, the study of generation or the making of a pedigree. Family history is a biographical study of a genealogically proven family and the community and country in which they lived. Now, according to the National Genealogical Society, the two terms are used interchangeably most of the time. For my purposes, the two disciplines are intertwined, hence why this course is entitled Becoming a Genealogist and a Family Historian. Here are some examples of the family tree charts. So the two on the left, the pedigree chart, that is a horizontal pedigree chart. And then there's a fan chart, again, a pedigree chart. And I don't know if you can see this or not, because you've got the screen, but I have a picture up. I don't know if you can see that or not, but anyway, the pedigree charts can be vertical, they can be horizontal, or they can be a fan chart. It's kind of blurry, but there's an all-in-one chart on the upper right, and then a descendants chart. And these all qualify as depictions of a family tree. Again, you're not intended to be able to read this because if if it were printed out properly so that you could read it, it would go on for quite a while. This is my pedigree chart, 12 generations. Again, just to give you an idea of what it would look like. Oops, let me go. And one more word about a descendants chart. The tree in this photograph depicted my great grandfather, Joe Schlosser. This was done, I put this together actually for a family reunion in 2017. So this was just a descendants chart. It just, it was just Joe Schlosser and all of his descendants. The two handsome dudes in this picture are my nephews, standing in front of their great-grandfather, my grandfather, Albert Schlosser. This chart was 46 feet long and 3 feet high. It went down one side of the hall where we were holding the reunion, and then around about a third of the connecting wall. If I had done an all-in-one family tree, if I had tried to print that out, which would have included Joe Schlosser's ancestors and his collateral relatives, there wouldn't have been enough room in the hall, and there definitely wouldn't have been enough money in my wallet. So in the next 3 slides, I will show you commonly used abbreviations, symbols, and pictographs. They're pretty much going to speak for themselves. I'm not going to discuss them in any length. As Chris mentioned at the beginning, I will have a package for you or a manual for you of materials available in October, and I'm going to include these slides in that package, so you don't have to take screenshots or you don't have to try to write these down. So these are abbreviations. They are frequently used by genealogists to share information with other genealogists. And also, you just might find them handy as well because it's a lot easier, for example, to put B period instead of writing out born, or S/O for son of. This slide is the commonly used genealogical symbols. So those are abbreviations, and now these are the symbols. I have found these symbols come into play when I'm dealing with people who do not read or write English or speak English. And so when I communicated with in the past with my French cousins and my German cousins, they frequently use these symbols. There are two that always kind of confuse me. The marriage symbol is a cross or a dagger. I'm not sure about the dagger, but a cross or a dagger. But to me, it always looks like a plus sign. So I'm always thinking that when I get these records from others, that they're talking about a marriage, but the marriage is really two rings touching each other, which is quite nice. But I always think that the dagger is a plus sign. You will also encounter, although not that frequently, not as frequently as the abbreviations or the symbols, pictograms on some materials, or you may want to use them yourself. These are the most commonly used pictograms in kinship charts. I will mention shortly that a gravestone can qualify as a genealogical record because it will have information on it, birth and death, obviously death, and maybe even other details about a person's life. So a tombstone is definitely a genealogical record. But so you need to also be aware of the commonly found gravestone symbols. And I've listed some here. The dove kind of jumps out at me anyway. Death of a woman who passed away at a young age. Lambs, death of children, representing purity and innocence. Now, while not relevant to me so far anyway, I love the tree stump. It was very popular from the 1880s to the 1920s, thanks to one man, Joseph Colin Root. After hearing a minister describe his congregation as trees in God's forest, Root established a fraternity called Woodmen of the World, a financial services and insurance company that provided financial assistance for burial services. The insurance package included headstones. Now, there are other symbols that you're going to find in cemeteries on tombstones that may, for example, reflect the deceased occupation. An anchor, for example, for somebody who was a sailor, a corn for a farmer, mortar and pestle for the medical profession, maybe a pharmacist or a doctor, four-leaf clover for somebody of Irish descent. Time does not permit me to go through all of the genealogy terms, the whole litany of genealogy terms. So I'm going to just focus on some a few of them that are very important, but there's a whole list of them that you can find at the Family Tree magazine. They have a glossary that's available to the public. Okay, so let's start off. First term is grand. Now, grand means that the relatives in question are 2 generations removed from one another. Okay, so the proper term for your brother's grandchildren is grand aunt or grand uncle, like grandparent. It's not great aunt and it's not great uncle. So you're going to have to kind of probably break some habits. So it's grand aunt or grand uncle, great grand aunt, great grand uncle. In other words, aunts and uncles follow the same pattern as parents as you tack on generations. Many genealogists also use second degree or third degree to describe a great-great-grandparent or a great-great-great-grandparent. And then if you get to like a 5th degree, you're doing great. Okay, so that's like 5 greats. So it's just much easier to say a 5th degree or a 5th great-grandparent or a 4th degree or 4th great-grandparent. Now it's a little confusing because you say 2nd degree great-grandparent, and so you have the 2 and then you also have the great, and you think, well, is that a 3rd or is it a 2nd? So just have to remember this. So a 2nd degree great-grandparent is a great-great-grandparent. Then there are cousins, once, twice, etc., removed, ascending and descending. All right, so hold on to your hats because we're going to talk about cousins. So let's look at this cousins chart. Its point is very simple. The number associated with your cousin has to do with the number of generations away from your common ancestor. So as I've noted here on the right, first cousins share a grandparent, second cousins share a great-grandparent, third cousins share a great-great-grandparent, fourth cousins share a third great-grandparent. Now also note though that there are first cousins once removed ascending and their first cousins once removed descending. Easy peasy, right? This is simple. Well, life gets a little bit more complicated though when you try to figure out your relationship with somebody in a different generation. So let's look at this chart again. This chart only looks at your relationship with others. Whoops, I don't think I have it. Hold on a minute. There we go. This chart only looks at your relationship with others. So you have to find the you, which is me. It's not, this is not an Abbott and Costello routine, I promise you. But so just focus on the you, which is over there to the left, and I've put my name there. Okay. So I'm going to do this in relationship to myself. So if you go right, just go straight across, you will see that Carol and I are first cousins because we share a grandparent, Mary Hiles, whose daughters, Mary and Abby Schlosser, were our mothers. They were sisters. Abby Schlosser was my aunt. Now, if you go farther right, just go over one more, and you will see Alice. Alice and I are second cousins because we share a great-grandmother, Albertine Ritz, whose daughters, Mary and Josephine Hiles, were our respective grandmothers. Okay, Helen, Alice's mother, you got that? So Helen, Alice's mother, and Josephine's daughter is my first cousin, once removed, ascending. My first cousin, once removed, ascending. Okay, now let's work down. Let's start again with my first cousin. So you see me, that's you, you got that, right? So there's you, and you go over to my first cousin, Carol. Okay, so her daughter, Kathy, is my first cousin, once removed, descending. Now, a typical error, and I think this is the one that happens the most, a typical error is to call this a second cousin. They'll just say, you know, there's my first cousin, there's her daughter, that's my second cousin. That's not true, because Kathy and I are not in the same generation. I'm in the same generation with her mother, Carol. Now, my daughter, Mary, is in the same generation as Kathy. All right, and so they are second cousins. And my granddaughter, Abby, and Carol's grandson, Tyler, in the same generation, and they are third cousins. But Tyler is my first cousin, twice removed, descending, because Tyler is 2 generations away from me. And so from my first cousin, his grandmother, Carol. All right, so I think you all have that, right? Okay, we're going to look at this. We're going to look at this chart one more time. So I can give you a quick tip. Count how many greats are in your common ancestors title and add 1 to find out what number cousin your relative is. Grandparents, of course, have no greats. I mean, they may be great, but they don't have any greats in their title. So the cousins who share grandparents, like Carol and I, are first cousins because 0 + 1 is 1. However, keep in mind that this trick only works if you're the same number of generations removed from your common ancestor. Now here, George Court and I share a great-great-grandfather, a second great-grandfather, William Court, who was born in Birmingham, England in 1800. So 2 + 1 is 3. George and I are third cousins. By the way, George and I talk almost every Sunday around 11 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock London time. George lives outside of Manchester, England, where his great-grandfather, William Court, and William's brother, my great-grandfather, Charles Court, were born. George turned 100 years old this year, actually on January 1st. And so happy birthday, George. There's one thing that this other thing I want to point out about this chart. It shows a phenomenon which you may encounter in your research. Families tend to repeat forenames, the first names. Because they frequently name their children after their parents or grandparents or their great-grandparents. In my story on the Court family, as I was researching the Court family and writing that story, I found 8 William Courts and 6 Charles Courts in 5 generations. And many of them, especially the ones from England, the the older generations did not have middle names. So it was just William Court, William Court, William Court, George Court, George Court, George Court. And so when I was writing the story, because I mean, my family we weren't aristocrats or anything. They were like blacksmiths and whitesmiths and mechanics. So they didn't go by William Court the First or William Court the Second. But when I was writing their stories, I actually had to put numbers by their names just to keep them straight for the reader, and also to just keep my sanity. Well, we're talking about cousins. I would like to digress briefly to mention the value of second cousins. First cousins are wonderful resources to learn about your aunts and your uncles, but generally they know as much or maybe even less than you do about your grand aunts and your granduncles and their families and ancestors. On the other hand, second cousins are great resources to learn about their branches of the family. And of course, third cousins are even greater resources if they're still alive and you can locate them. Now, take a look at this slide. Look first at the right side. The parents of my first cousins on my mother's side are my aunts and uncles. My first cousins and I grew up around each other, and we got the same information from our respective parents, who were siblings, about our heritage. My aunts Abby and Ruth used to sit around with my mom and talk about their moms and their dad's families. I was interested even as a little kid. Now, if you go to the left side, my second cousins on my father's side, on the other hand, knew about my father's first cousins, their parents, a generation away from my dad's generation. I didn't grow up with these cousins, first cousins once removed descending, but their children, my second cousins, did. So they had a lot of information that I did not have. So when did I have this epiphany? Well, after writing the stories of three sets of my great-grandparents, the Hiles, the Schlossers, and the Court, I got to the Vollmers. And I had no, let's go back here, I had no second cousins with whom to consult. At that time, I truly realized how valuable my second cousins had been in researching and writing about the other three branches of my family. My Ohio second cousins, this was Mike and Jim Rue up there, I vaguely remembered from my childhood. I found their names and addresses after researching their parents, and I wrote them letters. One of my, "Are you my cousin?" letter, "Are you my cousin?" I have literally sent out hundreds of letters saying, "Are you my cousin?" Now, once we connected, they added so much to my Ohio story, not just facts and details, but accounts of their families. For example, having dinner with their grandmother, my grand aunt Pettis Rue, every Sunday as they were growing up, and my grand aunt liked Manhattans. The Schlosser second cousins were more familiar to me, but I still had to do some digging to locate them. When I did, I was greatly rewarded, as the three shown here. The late Chuck Olstner and the Schmain sisters had written their own family stories, the relevant parts of which I was able to incorporate with proper attribution, of course, into the Schlosser history. The Court second cousin, Shirley, I found through Ancestry DNA. I thought her grandfather, Charles Court, my grandfather, Dolph Court's brother, had no children. That's how I was researching. I didn't think he had any children. She set me straight. He had 7. And that really set me off on a whole new line of research. Okay, now let's talk about something fairly obvious. What is a genealogical record? Well, as laid out here, it provides vital and biographical information on individuals and families. That could be birth, death, marriage, burial, probate. Includes private, like a family Bible, government-created birth and death certificate, or commercially created documents like city directories, oral and written. Most likely was originally written on paper, but could be born digital, may be available on paper, microfilm, or microfiche, but also could be digitized, and may be indexed, abstracted, or fully keyword searchable. And as I mentioned earlier, there are other types of other objects like a tombstone that would qualify as a record, or family quilts or memorabilia. So I'm going to give you some examples, if I get to the right one of this. So let me, okay, number one here is a photograph of a page from a Court family Bible. in the possession of my third cousin, George. I transferred the information on this page to a family tree chart to ascertain what it provided and what it was missing. I then recorded the information in my electronic family tree, which I keep on Ancestry.com. On the right is a reproduction of my second degree great-grandparents, William and Sarah Court's 1824 marriage certificate. I acquired this document by happenstance. My husband and I were visiting the Manchester, England Cathedral while I was in the city doing research on the Court family. When I told the lady at the visitor's desk why I was in the city, she asked me if I wanted to meet the cathedral's archivist, Mr. Geoffrey Robinson. Of course, I said. She called him, and he came to the desk. He was an Episcopalian priest. He took my husband and me to the part of the cathedral from the Middle Ages that had survived the Nazi bombings during World War II. Manchester was a major industrial city, as I'm sure you know, and was bombed extensively during the war. The room looked like something right out of a Harry Potter movie, 2 stories high, with shelves filled with old manuscripts and books. And you know, fast forwarding, if Harry Potter, I'd known about him, I would have thought I was going to get a wand. As I had some idea when my ancestors had been married, it did not take too much time for Mr. Robinson to find the original record. As he opened up the book to the page with the original document, which William Courts had signed and where his bride, Sarah Jones, had made her mark, I started to cry. And just a spoiler alert, you're going to cry a lot. Just be prepared, you're going to cry a lot. Mr. Robinson wouldn't let me take a photograph, but he copied it, the information on a form as it appeared on the original. This record is a photograph taken from the microfilm of Hungarian Jewish birth records of my son-in-law's grandfather, Paul Schmergel, and his granduncle, Stephen Schmergel. I found the microfilm in the FamilySearch library in Salt Lake City with the help of one of the library's staff members who was able to navigate the records in Hungarian. And I'm going to talk more about the library next week. But one of the amazing things about that library is the staff trained in many languages. Number 4 here is a digitized version of my great-grand-aunt Marie Ann Ritz's 1835 birth certificate from Molsheim, Alsace, which I discovered on FamilySearch.org. If you have Alsatian ancestors, you'll find that your cup will just run over because their records are absolutely incredible. This birth record, for example, here is information on the time of birth, the parents, the mother's maiden name, occupations, residences, witnesses, even occupation of witnesses. So the information that really paints a picture of the community and family in which a child is born. The record on the right here is a ship manifest from 1859, which recorded the arrival of my great-grandmother Mary Ann Murray Court and her 4 children on the SS Kangaroo into the New York harbor a year after her husband arrived on the Albert Gallatin. Mary Ann and Charles, by the way, had 4 more children after they got to America. Mary Ann and her children would have been processed through Castle Garden, which opened in 1855 as the primary immigration center and operated as such until Ellis Island. Let me try that again. Ellis Island opened in 1892. And a lot of people just think Ellis Island's been around for a lot longer than it was around. So Ellis Island did not open until 1892. And previously, the main facility for processing immigrants from 1855 on was Castle Garden. I have a picture of the kangaroo there. There is a great, sorry about that. That was just some spam that I can't seem to control on my computer. I can do it on my phone, but not on my computer. In any event, there's a wonderful website where you can find pictures of old ships, and I always include them in my stories where appropriate. So this slide shows the various medium that you're going to find records. Of course, there's paper records. You're also going to find records on microfilm and microfiche. Microfilm is stated here, 35mm film on which printed materials are photographed at greatly reduced size for ease of storage. The digital lens of the microfilm reader enlarges the image, allowing you to read the contents. Microfiche is a card made up of transparent film used to store printed information in a miniaturized form. You also need a reader. So obviously anything that's paper or print, microfilm or microfiche, that you're going to have to find. I'll talk about that more next week in person. Digital records are, of course, those that you can view on a computer screen. Now, a digital record exists either because a digital version has been made of a paper, microfilm, microfiche, or photographic record, or because it was born digital. Now, I'd love to say born digital, but it's a practical matter that probably is going to predate most of the records which genealogists are looking for now predate the digital age, but there may be some that are born digital. Another very important word that you need to know is index. You have to understand what a genealogical index is indicated here. It is a work that consists wholly or chiefly of systematic guides to the content of resources, usually presented as alphabetical lists of names, places, and subjects with reference to their locations in the resources. It's very important to note this is not a citable record. It just is going to take you to a record. Okay, so an index is great, but it just takes you to another record. So here is an example where an index took me to maybe one of the most valuable finds that I've ever had. It was truly a great find. It was an index that took me to the last will and testament of my second great-grandmother, Anna Maria Lufta Summer, who died in 1891 in Covington, Kentucky. And in this last will and testament, she left $100, which was would have been $3,400 today, to be said in Spella, Hanover, which is in present-day Germany, for the repose of her soul and the soul of her husband, John. And it was through just this one little piece out of this last will and testament that I was able to find Spella in Hanover, and then I was also able to find her birth records, her brother's birth records, and her father's death certificate. You also need to be familiar with an abstract, which is an inventory of the most important details of a genealogical document. Now, it's not the document. You're really always looking for the original document, but it's very helpful, and it can be the next best thing. It's better than an index for sure. I mean, an index takes you someplace, but you can't use the index as proof, but it leads you someplace else. This is an example of an abstract. I found this at the Library of Virginia in Richmond, Virginia, when I was there. I did research there while I attended the annual convention for the National Genealogical Society. That was in this past June. The Library of Virginia is absolutely fabulous. It is an absolutely fabulous place. Anyway, this was an abstract I found. They had several rooms of books of abstracts of all the counties in Virginia. It was phenomenal. Anyway, this was an abstract. I was looking for information on my ancestor, Dabney Pettis, and I found these abstracts about property owned by his brother, John. Okay, keyword searchable digitized record. Now this just invokes just a little bit of heaven for a genealogist. So this is a work with access to word, topic, or name without the use of an index or an abstract. For example, the Cynthiana Harrison County Library has a searchable digitized collection of the log cabin newspapers accessible at the library or online. A simple search of an ancestor surname, Schlosser, produced my grandmother's obituary, my uncle's marriage announcement, and a story on his seed business. And the Schlossers weren't even from Harrison County, although my uncle's wife, Tilly King, was. At this point, I'd like to mention two programs sponsored by the Kentucky Genealogical Society to promote the digitization of genealogically significant Kentucky records. the grant program and the KYGS FamilySearch collaboration. The Society offers money grants to Kentucky's public libraries and genealogical and historical societies for the digitization of such records, a program that was initiated in 2019. To date, we have awarded grants to 11 organizations to digitize records, including 19th century newspapers, school ledgers and orphan records, guardianships and apprenticeships, and local genealogists' personal collections. The deadline, if you're interested, for submission of applications this year is November 1st. And if you're interested, just go to kygs.org, go to our website, and you can easily find information on how to apply for a grant. The Society has also joined forces with FamilySearch.org, which is the free research database of the LDS Church. I'm going to talk about it next week, actually week 3, to locate genealogically significant Kentucky records, in particular primary records. That's birth, death, marriage, divorce, probate, wills, deeds, voter, tax, which FamilySearch has yet to digitize, and then arrange for FamilySearch to digitize them on site and post them online free of charge. Recently, because of the collaboration, a phenomenal collection was digitized and made available online free of charge at FamilySearch.org, the Jefferson County Estate Inventory Books, over 50,000 pages. And I'm going to discuss them in session 3 to demonstrate how to search certain types of records on FamilySearch. I want to mention just a few other terms that you're going to come across in the world of genealogy that you need to be aware of. They have maybe special meanings in the world of genealogy, and one of them is ephemera. Ephemera are generally defined as collectible memorabilia for a short-term purpose, like show tickets, ticket stubs, playing cards, postcards, etc. Ephemera are almost always paper-based, often written or printed items that were expected to have a short-term popularity or usefulness. But in the realm of genealogy, ephemera refers to, the term ephemera refers to family collection of photographs, letters, school programs, yearbooks, death cards, etc. These are items that have genealogical significance, and they're also very fragile and very apt to either be thrown away or just to deteriorate. And so you should maybe consider, if you have these lying around, consider putting together your own digitization project and before they get thrown away. This is kind of a ephemera on the top. So on the bottom right, that I think is a good picture of what ephemera usually looks like, letters and cards and written materials, programs. On the top right is a picture. So I've sort of digitized this of the patches that my mother wore as an air raid warden on Kyles Lane, Fort Wright, Kentucky, during World War II. Now, she apparently did a really good job, as there's no Nazi planes ever strafed the street. Her nephew, Butch Ostendorf, my first cousin, found them in his mother's things, and and gave them to me. And so they are memorialized. This is a picture from the Schlosser family history that I wrote. But I grew up hearing about my mother being an air raid warden, and it was such a surprise. It was such a delight when my cousin found these and gave them to me. Another term with which you will need to be familiar is the word repository. It refers to a place, building, or receptacle where things are maybe stored. Now, for genealogists, that means a government building, an office, a library, a genealogy or a historical society, or any facility where public or publicly available records can be found. So repository, and I'll use that term a lot during the month, repository. So on the left, of course, is the U.S. Archives. and the Library of Congress, the Jefferson Building. On the right top is the Boone County Library, the Hebron branch, and on the bottom is the Kentucky Gateway Museum Center in Maysville, Mason County, Kentucky. Oops, let's go back. Let's go forward. Last but not least, brick wall. Okay, every genealogist, even professional ones, eventually encounter brick walls in research, those seemingly unsolvable gaps for which there are no records available to break through to the earlier generations. Now, this could be because you've run out of online records. The records you need aren't available, or they are not yet available to the public. You face maiden and other name mysteries. The records you need have been destroyed. The only records you can find are compiled genealogies, or you've run out of American records. I mean, there are lots of reasons why a genealogist confronts a brick wall. Now, this course will not explore how to break down brick walls. It's just beyond the scope of these presentations. Right now, I just want to introduce you to the concept and assure you that there are websites, publications, and even courses dedicated to helping genealogists break down such walls. So I don't want you to get discouraged. So remember earlier on today, this hour, I said, you know, don't do too much. I don't want you to get discouraged. I don't want you to get overwhelmed by all the information that you're going to collect. And likewise, I don't want you to get discouraged if you hit a brick wall, because there are ways of breaking down brick walls. To close today's session, I'd like to show you a photograph of Dr. Thomas Clark, a famous Kentucky historian and UK professor, literally considered the savior of many Kentucky records from being lost forever. Not surprisingly, but appropriately, the Kentucky Historical Society Center for Kentucky History is named in his honor. So I'm going to end with his quote, and the session with his quote. A society without records is a society without navigational equipment. So that's it for today. In today's session on becoming a genealogist and family historian. Next week, I will explore initial and ultimate challenges which you will face, techniques and tools which you will need at first for recording your research. I had a little glitch there, sorry about that. The types of records for which you will search in person and online, and the location of those records for in-person research. And I hope to see you then. I think we have a few minutes if anyone has any questions, and I am going to say, okay, but I'm going to end this session and show.
Does anyone have any questions for Susan? Susan, thank you so much. We're really looking forward to sessions 2 through 5 that will be every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And just a reminder that this presentation, as well as all of Susan's presentations, they're being recorded. They'll be available on the Kentucky Genealogical Society YouTube channel. And Susan's manual that she has created for this series will be posted and shared in the 5th class. Okay. Right, and lots of questions that are just coming in that are asking about, was this recorded? So yes, it is.
Okay, all right, that was an easy one.
Yeah, and if folks, a lot of people saying they missed the first part, that's okay. It is being recorded and you can access it. Just go to YouTube to Kentucky Genealogical Society, and this class will be posted tomorrow, and that will be the case with all the classes. So they'll be posted the day after. You'll be able to access those on YouTube, and you can watch them as many times as you'd like. So, okay. Anybody else have any other questions for Susan for today? All right, well, we want to respect everybody's time. Again, I want to say thank you to Susan for today's wonderful presentation. Thank you to Melissa Barker, my wonderful co-host, and we will see you all next Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your weekend.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Thanks, Melissa. Bye-bye, everybody.